Great. I am excited to have Ashley Phillips and Araceli Rosillo here with me tonight. We are talking about a very important topic, which is Braille. And most of us remember learning to read by sight, tracing letters on a page. And for students who are blind or visually impaired, literacy looks and feels different. Today, we are exploring Braille, why it matters, and how advocates are trying to strengthen how it is taught in Georgia. So these two remarkable women, Ashley and Araceli, are here this evening to discuss. And so the first section here I'd like to talk about is really helping our audience visualize Braille and understand its value. And so this first question is to both of you. And so for someone who has never seen or touched Braille, how would you describe it in the simplest way?
Honestly, this is Ashley. A lot of people that are not visually impaired like to refer to Braille as like another language. So it's almost like learning another language, except with your fingers, not your eyes. And when people ask me, Braille, what is that? My response is it's a combination of six dots that you feel with your fingers. And I mean, that's really all the explanation a lot of people need.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also think that a lot of people really only think of maybe like like if it's in English, if it's Braille in English, they only think about maybe the rules of English. Um, but they forget also, or maybe they just don't know that Braille also has its own rules. So it's not anything that is, as straightforward as a lot of people think. It has its own rules and forms that it follows.
Ah, that's fascinating. And Araceli, I think you bring us great into question number two, which is when you introduce Braille to a new learner, and Ashley, feel free to chime in here. What do you feel helps create that sort of first breakthrough moment, especially knowing that Braille has its own rules?
Everyone is different, so everyone's breakthrough moments happen at different points. I think though, I think I would say in my experience, the breakthrough comes when they can really relate the concept of using Braille to something that they do on an everyday basis or that they're passionate about. Like I just had somebody who really connected with the idea of just being able to read signs when they're out in public. So, not necessarily having to memorize what every single door is in the building, but having the ability, just like, people who are sighted, to go up to the sign and just read it for themselves. So they really connected with that. And for them, that was that breakthrough moment, but it differs from person to person.
For me, it's I've worked with and I know Araceli has too, with both children and adults. Um for the adults, I've noticed a lot of it is based on independence. They, especially if they have lost their sight later in life, they just want the ability to be independent again, like they used to be when they could see. Um, and for the kids, I'm not gonna lie, some of the kids do fight it because they're kids and they just don't want to learn it. But that's when trying to make it fun comes into play. And even with the kids and adults, I like to just start with the muffin tin with like six ping pong balls or golf balls, and we just have fun. Like learning the ins and outs of the Braille cell, and we just turn it into a game. And I've noticed that both the kids and the adults actually like that.
Ah, that's a smart way to teach. Good teacher there, Ashley. Um, and so, Ashley, you have enough vision to read large print, but your parents made sure you learned Braille anyway. So, how has that shaped your independence and your career?
I'm actually very thankful that my parents forced me to learn Braille. Um, because in order for me to read large print, it has to be probably about 38 point font and bold. And even then, it doesn't take long before my eyes get tired and I can't do it anymore. Um, and starting Braille from day one when I was in kindergarten, it felt natural to me. It felt normal to me instead of learning it later, like some of the other kids that I've worked with. Um, that's the one thing I never thought was learning Braille because it made life so much easier. It took a lot of pressure off my eyes and even with my posture, because even when I'm using a computer, I have to lean in like this, and it's messed up my posture pretty bad. Um, so learning Braille has really given me a lot of independence as far as um, being able to proofread things and being able to just read on my own, reading bank statements, reading signs in an elevator because I know it looks weird to people when someone just sticks their face in the buttons in the elevator to try to read it. Um, I mean, so just a lot of independence that I'm glad that I had the opportunity to have because otherwise life would have been a struggle without learning Braille to get me through school.
That's such a profound statement around also the physical impact of learning to read Braille, which I think is something that we as educators don't always consider. So thank you for sharing that because I think that is a very unique perspective that we really should keep in mind. And
Yeah.
so, this next question now is for Araceli. As someone who is totally blind, what role does Braille play in your daily life, confidence, and your sense of agency?
Well, I can read. It just boils down to I can read just like everybody else. Um, and so you read to do pretty much everything in your life. And so that's how I am able, that's how it adds to my confidence. I read Braille when it comes to doing my work. For professionally, I used Braille to read when I was in school taking classes. Um, I read when I'm out and about in public, trying to find different offices, um, mail, even cards for leisure. It's I can read just like everyone else, and it's just the way we one of the ways in which we communicate in the world. It's a very fundamental skill, and it just makes me happy that I'm able to participate in that, in doing so slightly different way, but still it's the same thing at the end of the day.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for sharing. As we move on, I want to think about why Braille still remains essential in today's digital age, because computers seem to be everywhere, just technology. And so this question is to both of you. With so much technology that reads text aloud, some people wonder why Braille is still needed. So why is it still so important today?
Go ahead, Araceli, you first.
Again, because we need to be able to read. Sorry, sorry, sorry. Let me calm down. Okay. Because we need to be able to read. So I guess I'll first start off by saying Braille is not for everyone. Everyone learns and consumes information in a different way. But I think it's very important to really analyze when you're working with in the blindness profession, when you're working with adults or children, really, really sit down and analyze um, and do the different analysis that you need to do to determine in which way that person will best what learning media they would best benefit from as it relates to their eye condition. Is it progressive? Is it more steady? All those things. Also their goals. Oftentimes what we look at is goals for kids and adults. So just considering that is very important because it affects just the overall outcome as the years progress. Um, and it is still very important, also more specifically to the question that you asked, because technology can only get you so far. If the lights, if the power goes off, your technology goes with it. If it doesn't go right away, it will eventually when it runs out of battery. And then what will you do? Um, Also, when it comes to students with school age children in particular, um, it affects how they will, like how they will perform also professionally. You often see a lack of skills that could have been learned at a younger age once they get to adulthood. I work primarily with adults, so I see this often, and it's because they weren't taught Braille when they would really have benefited from it and would have thrived knowing it. Sorry, that was such a long-winded answer, but yeah.
Mine is pretty simple. It's even though with all the technology out there for even sighted kids who are not disabled, um, yeah, sure, we teach them how to write, I mean how to type, how to surf the web, how to, do all of these things that technology allows us to do. But in the end, we always start with the basics, right?
Yep.
With reading, writing, and pencil and paper. So I don't see why it would be any different for kids who are blind, because we also need to learn to read on our own, write on our own, and even something like formatting, spelling.
Yes.
I would like to teach a kid what a quotation mark is, which, they're not going to understand just from having JAWS or a teacher or a recording or AI or whatever reading everything to them. Like kids who are blind need the same access to the same learning materials as kids who are sighted.
Yeah, and to kind of like add to that a little bit, I will say like even as an adult, sometimes the English language is not straightforward. It
Mhm.
is a very confusing and tricky language. And so sometimes, I'm listening to my phone read to me or my computer or whatever. I'm like, oh, okay. And then I see that word actually written out, and I was like, I had no idea that was spelled like that. And I would not have known if I hadn't have read it for myself in Braille.
I love the passion of you both because it's
Yeah.
necessary, because this is a civil rights issue, right? It's a
Yeah.
fundamental right to access to literacy for all people. And
Mm-hmm.
so thank you for your passionate responses. And so I love to sort of help myself too learn and understand for our broader audience. What is the difference between hearing words and reading and writing through touch? And this question is for you both.
Well, it's kind of like what I said, right? It's like you hear the word, but the way it sound in English and other languages as well is not necessarily how it's actually spelled. And then also kind of just touching on what Ashley said earlier, there's punctuations, there's the rules of English and literature that you can miss out on because with technology you have the ability to turn off, which a lot of people do, um, the punctuation echo, right? Because it does get annoying, comma, period, ellipsis. It does get annoying hearing that. So if you turn it off, you kind of you may forget, especially some of those rules regarding punctuation that are not so obvious, like periods or question marks and things like that.
And for me, because I work more with kids than adults, although I have worked with both. Um, but in the school districts, I've worked for Cobb and for Cherokee, and they have the like those reading tests, like the RIs, MIs that they have to do.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a difference between reading comprehension and listening comprehension.
Yeah.
Um, and some kids do better with listening, some do better with reading it for themselves, but I feel like taking a reading test
Mm-hmm.
is not listening to someone else read it to you. That's not reading comprehension, that is listening comprehension, and that's a totally different area.
Oh yeah.
Absolutely. I mean, they are very, very different. And so, Araceli, you had mentioned before, kind of like with working with your card and wanting to be able to read like an instruction manual. And is there like a pivotal moment that you can remember when Braille gave you independence that audio could not?
Um, hmm. I guess maybe when, as I got older and being and seeing, meeting more people who are blind that were, just of all ages, different backgrounds, and just seeing, how, again, I was able to quickly read signs or something like that, but they had, a much more difficult time because they had not learned Braille. And I was like, oh, you didn't? Why not? And then, of course, then that's that deeper issue right there that we're talking about. Why not? And so, yeah, I think there in those situations is where I was like, oh, okay, you know, this is actually super important and essential.
Yeah, so much of what you're saying, it sounds like connects back to that like sense of independence and autonomy and just
Hmm.
sort of that right as a person to be your own person and be able to navigate the world. And so, Ashley, in your tutoring and transcription work, what patterns do you see when learners rely only on listening versus building that Braille literacy?
So especially with kids, let's just be real, their listening skills need work. A lot of times I have noticed, even with high school kids, because right now I work at a high school, it's one thing to read a passage to someone and be like, okay, what'd you get from that passage? Try to regurgitate. And they're like, I don't know. Can you read that again?
Hmm.
Versus when this particular student that I work with, when she reads it with her own hands, her own two hands, she really seems to grasp and understand what she's reading. And, it kind of sticks in their head more when they can read it for themselves. Because, and this has nothing to do with blind or sighted, anyone, right? If you listen to an audiobook or if you're listening to a podcast or whatever, at some point you don't even realize it, but you tune out to what you're listening
Mhm.
to and
Hmm.
it becomes background noise at that point. So I've noticed that it really does stick with the student more, especially with math. Uh,
Oh, oh, sorry. Go ahead.
it
I
is
agree.
really hard, and I have seen it with both
Ooh.
elementary and with high school, where they'd be like, "Okay, 1/7 plus 1/5 equals X plus 2/3." Okay, no,
Ooh.
what is X? And you're like, I'm sorry, what?
Right?
But when they can read it by themselves, they and also even work it out by themselves in Braille, it gives them it actually helps it, stick in their head and they retain it better. Because again, if they're listening, it's going to go in one ear and out the other a lot of times.
Yeah, because you also have to think about how do they learn? How does this person best learn? Are they an auditory learner, kinesthetic, all these different things, and that plays a role too. It's just really frustrating because I just recently experienced this last year. I had to take a test. A group of us had to take a test for something that I'm involved in, and then automatically all the sighted people, the instructors and whatnot, were like, "Oh, we'll just get you a reader." I'm like, "Ugh, not for Araceli, you won't. Ugh, I like to read it for myself. Thank you very much." And it sounded kind of like I did, like I don't know, kind of uppity, but it wouldn't if it was them. They would not want a reader. They would want to read the test for themselves. But when we requested, it's like, "Oh, you're making a big fuss." Mm,
Mhm.
okay.
No, thank you for sharing. Yeah, it's unfortunate that that happened.
Yeah.
It assumes that people don't have the agency that they do because of
Yeah.
Braille,
Yeah.
right? And I'm sorry that happened. And hopefully that's something that this conversation can help change is the
Yeah.
assumptions people make. Um, and so, I as we move along, I now want to jump into maybe some more personal and vulnerable stories to help people connect to the heart of what it means to be somebody who reads Braille and how important that is for access for kids. And so, Ashley, you've spent a number of years now transcribing books into Braille. Can you tell us about a learner whose life or learning changed because they got access to those materials in Braille?
Um, we had a student at a high school in Cobb County that at first preferred to read 56 point font print, which,
Ooh.
anybody who has ever played around with the font size in Microsoft Word, you would have like one word taking up a whole line
Mhm.
and
Mm-hmm.
it would be huge. And he struggled with his eyesight. You could tell his eyes were wearing down after a time, and because he started learning Braille when he was in, I want to say, fifth grade. When kids are in the middle school age, they fight it so much more because it's middle school and we've all been there, and middle school kids are just mean and he want to be different. And but I don't think he realized it at first until probably his junior year of high school. But he actually did a lot better when he used his fingers and not his eyes, because his eyes were just, they weren't reliable to him, and he had Stargardt, so he was
Mm-hmm.
losing his vision. So once he started using Braille, like, things, it went faster, it went easier. um and I don't know if he still uses it now because he's long graduated. But again, I want to just point, because I know we talk about literacy, but there's more to Braille than just literacy. um
Mm-hmm.
Math comprehension, you are not going to get that math comprehension without reading it with your own two fingers. um and also graphics, we're talking graphs, maps,
Yeah.
pictures. There's also, like, people can color Braille pictures, so there's a whole world that gets opened up to people who otherwise, instead of just having things read to them or trying to remember what someone said, there's a whole new world that gets opened up to them when they start using Braille.
That's a really beautiful point around how, yeah, it's not just the text you read, but it allows you to understand and see these images that children otherwise wouldn't be able to have access to. That's such an important and really powerful point. So thank you for making that. And so now this next question goes to Araceli.
Mm.
What was your own Braille journey like, and what helped you persist through any hard or challenging parts that arose?
Regards to Braille, I really didn't have any challenging parts to it. Kind of like what Ashley said earlier, it was just natural. Because, well, for me, it was super, extremely natural because I'm totally blind. There was no way that I could see any sort of print at all. So yeah, it was natural. I started learning in elementary school, literally when I was like in kindergarten. When everybody else was starting to read and write, I was too, just in Braille. Um, so I started really early, and usually the younger you start learning something, the easier it'll stick with you, especially if you continue with it. And I literally had no other way of consuming. Well, I guess, I could do it auditorily, but we already talked about how I feel about that. But yeah, so Braille it is, and Braille it was.
Ah, nice. It sounds like it was an empowering experience and a good one. And
Yeah,
so I'm so happy you had that.
yeah.
And this next question now goes to both of you. And what is something sighted people often misunderstand about Braille or blindness that you want people to know?
Braille isn't sign language. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just about to say, not sign language.
um a lot of people actually have heard of Braille before. Um when I say, "Oh yeah, I read Braille," they're like, "Oh, that's the thing with dots, right? Or the thing that you feel with your fingers." Like, some of them do know what it is.
Hmm.
It's just a matter of explaining to them, kind of like we're doing here today, how it helps us be independent and how it benefits us. Um, and for me personally, because I work as a Braille transcriber, one thing that we have not been able to get through to people is the time and the effort and
Hmm.
that it takes to put something in Braille. A lot of people just think, oh, you just run it through a machine and it's all done, like a copy.
Yep.
And there's so much that goes into it. So it's not like something that can just be easily done. People have to take a lot of time and effort to make it. And that's why, we fight so hard for to people to have access to it.
Hmm. I
Wow.
agree with everything she said.
It was powerful. I mean,
Yeah, amen.
yes, there you go. That's all. Amen.
Yeah.
Um, well, now let's talk about a hot topic, right? Which is
Okay.
the new Braille literacy bill. And so just a little bit of a frame for our audience. Georgia already requires evaluation and access to accessible formats, but that implementation can really vary. And so thinking about this bill, and this question is for you both, what is at stake when access depends on a child's zip code?
When access depends on a child's zip code, like what do you mean?
Oh, sure. knowing that, we don't implement across the state of Georgia,
Oh,
implementation isn't consistent. So one child who lives in XYZ zip code could have a very different experience or exposure to Braille than a child living in a different zip code. And so, what does that mean
okay.
for our kids?
Well, I mean, yeah, that means literally what I experienced, right? When I said that, when I would start to branch out and start meeting other people in the blindness community that were my age, that really would have benefited from Braille, they did not know it. So it's literally the same, right? Like some people will get it and some will not, and there'll be a huge flaw. And so when you see the next generation of blind people or people with low vision come up, there's going to be those major gaps that then will have to be fixed as adults.
Mhm.
Well, and as someone who has worked with a few different school districts, I mean, I've worked in Cobb, I currently work in Cherokee, and I also contract with Forsyth County. And it also depends, unfortunately, on the number. I have a Braille student who is in Carroll County schools, and I some of it is not zip code based. Without getting into a whole nother subject, I'm just going to say that some of it is also teacher based.
Yep, yep.
Like, how there's all this talk about school choice and things like that. When you get kids in like a small town school district, and there's only, let's say, one or two blind kids, you are probably going to end up with a teacher that's not very experienced in teaching Braille. And
Mhm.
um, it a lot of it really depends on that. It's not just a zip code problem. It is also an education problem when it comes to the ones teaching the Braille. So I would hope that with the passage of this Braille literacy bill, it would also encourage more instruction for the teachers of the visually impaired who have to teach the Braille to the kids.
Yeah, I would say so. I'm a certified vision rehabilitation therapist. So we talk about issues like this, quite often amongst, our professional peers. And yes, it kind of falls also back onto the universities as well, not just Georgia, because in Georgia we don't have a university that offers a degree in for TBI or anything else in the blindness field.
Mhm.
But so it kind of falls back on those universities to really step up their programs that they have, because sometimes you have very, programs that don't really emphasize Braille as much and don't go into depth as much as they should. And so, of course, the TBIs and the professionals that graduate from there, well, they don't have the knowledge unless they really go and step outside of the class and maybe find a tutor to really learn it in depth because they know the importance of it. So it kind of stems from there as well.
Wow. That's a great connection back to, how we even prepare teachers, right? At the
Yeah.
at the graduate, undergraduate level. And so you both teed this question up perfect, which is
Yeah.
next, which is, one part of the bill focuses on who is qualified to assess a child's need for Braille and how teachers actually demonstrate proficiency. So what do you want decision makers to understand about Braille learning potential and instruction quality?
I think it's important to um, really understand how certified vision professionals across the board are very important. Emphasis on certified because, it's one thing to maybe learn about Braille or learn about vision for like one semester in your program in university. Say you're majoring in something different, right? But it's a completely other thing when you go to a program that's dedicated specifically to be a TBI, to be a VRT, to be an O&M, all these different things in the blindness field because you are focusing your the entire during that entire year, 2 years, or however long it takes you on blindness. And there's so many nuances to it. So I think it's very important to recognize that this is not a nilly-willy type of thing. You should be looking for certified and supporting certified professionals and encouraging them because there is a significant lack of certified professionals just all across the board in the United States.
Well, okay, and there is a program here in Georgia. It's like I guess like a supplementary type program.
Oh, the supply, yeah.
Yeah, the RISA program where, you can become a certified TVI, but I have actually worked with teachers because I tutor in Braille, so I can tutor adults, kids, sighted, blind, it doesn't matter. And I've worked with some teachers who are going through that or who have gone through that, and the lack of Braille training there. So I would really pay attention to what kind of certification we're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Like me, I'm not a certified teacher, but I am a certified Braille transcriber. So I feel like someone who has maybe a Braille certification, even, but may not
Yeah.
be teacher certified, could help, not do, but maybe help with the evaluation process. Um, Also, I think it needs to be taken into account, all of that aside, does the kid have a degenerative eye condition?
Yes.
If they do, they have to learn Braille. I'm sorry that because I do know people who again have lost their sight as they go along and they struggle more and more because they're so used to relying on their eyes. And honestly, I was one of them
Mm-hmm.
who tried to rely on my eyesight more than I should have. And so I feel like it's a combination. And as far as who should decide, I really feel like there needs to be a good conversation with the teacher and the parent. Um, they both need to be able to make that decision, or maybe not the teacher, but the whoever's doing the evaluation and the parent. I think both need to come
Yeah.
together on that decision.
Thank you for both of you for your input on that. Actually, the bill also would require publishers to provide digital files that can convert into Braille more easily. So how would that change day-to-day access for students and teachers?
It would make life a lot easier. Let me tell you,
Mm-hmm.
as a Braille transcriber, when I worked for Cobb County, we all kept everything that we brailled, but it wasn't necessarily kept like in a record type format. Um, so let's say, one year you're working on something and then the next year you get something very similar to that. A lot of times in Cobb, we just remade it. Like we started from scratch. But when I moved over to Cherokee, I noticed that they kept all of their graphics that they made, and some of
Mm-hmm.
the files and stuff. So when we went back to that, or if we had a kid coming up behind another kid that was doing the same work, it was like, oh, we already have this. Sweet. So a lot less production time. The kids can have access to it a lot sooner. Um, it would make everybody's life a lot easier.
Yeah.
And Araceli, this next one is for you. Thinking back to your school experience, how would these types of changes have improved your learning and sense of belonging?
Um, mm, I think maybe I would have learned about many other, resources related to Braille. My TVI when I was in elementary school was very, she was very old school, in her approach. So, and there's so many different ways to teach and engage somebody who is learning Braille. And I think maybe that could have benefited me as well because I could have learned about so many other tools and approaches and styles of learning it and incorporating it into my everyday routine.
Thank you. And this next question now is for both of you. And we hit on it a little bit in talking about, teacher preparation. I know a lot of school leaders right now worry about staffing shortages and implementation. And so what are some practical first steps districts can take now to build capacity while moving toward the intention or the intent behind the bill?
So there are actually a lot more people out there than you think. I think one good way to start, like for example, as a Braille transcriber, my position is not a certified position, it's considered a classified position. So maybe if you even just had people becoming like paraprofessionals or like teacher aides
Mm-hmm.
or um, Braille transcribers who could come in and who could help, because there are a lot of blind people out there who
Yeah.
are looking for employment and who need employment. And Braille is one of those things that, that if we just opened up the field a little bit more, you would get a lot more people in there.
I like the idea behind opening, creating access because, you know, staffing shortages are not an excuse to not provide kids with what they're owed in terms of their civil
Yeah.
rights, which is access to opportunity, right? We can't allow that to be an excuse. So I like that thought. Before we move on, Araceli, is there anything you wanted to say around um, you know, or staffing concerns or how to implement the heart of the bill?
Yeah, I think it's also to kind of like a matter of just getting creative. Like what Ashley said was a, really good idea. Instead of just saying, "Oh, well, there isn't any, we're short staffed. Oh my goodness, what can we do?" Just kind of taking the time to brainstorm because it is a very important, uh, thing that we need to be able to provide to students. So just kind of taking the time to brainstorm. And maybe in some cases, there's no need to reinvent the wheel, right? Maybe there are some things that we have done before or are already being done, in other states that we could also look at implementing as well.
Thank you. Um, you know, Learning Braille can sometimes feel intimidating for educators, right? Ashley, what advice or resources do you want to share to help teachers build confidence and competence?
So there are a lot of resources out there. I really wish that it would be required for TVIs to also have these transcription certification. I mean, I know that's not quite a thing yet, but because that's free, it's offered through the National Federation of the Blind, and the teachers could learn the Braille along with how to write the Braille and transcribe the Braille themselves. And that would, help with the staffing shortages that we talked about earlier. The Hadley School also has
Mm-hmm.
online Braille classes. Um, like my organization, I run a freelance contracting a Braille business. There's Braille tutors out there.
Yep.
I mean, there are a ton of resources out there. If teachers are, willing and able to, get their hands on those resources and really take the time to learn. And my husband used to teach Braille classes at the library, and the way that he always said it was, as long as I stay ahead of my students, I'm good. So, I mean, it could be a learning process together, like the teacher and the kid together learning the Braille.
Yeah, I really like the idea of tutors because there are plenty of blind people who know Braille and it's something that they use on an everyday basis. And yeah, I helped somebody actually a few years ago who did what I'm talking about, where she was working on getting her TVI certification, but wanted an extra bit of help on the side. So I tutored her, and it did help her retain the information more. So that's always a really good approach.
Love it. Um, you guys, you know what's coming. You kind of already mentioned this, but
Mm-hmm.
what does effective practice look like for a teacher who's actually learning Braille alongside their students?
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
this is uh,
Ashley's ready.
this is a touchy subject. I really wish teachers would, not just learn it with their eyes, but also learn from the student's perspective. Learn what it's like to actually feel the Braille, like, because sometimes, kids do struggle, especially younger kids with their itty bitty fingers, and they're trying to feel around, and they're like, I don't get it, I don't feel this, what are you talking about with dots? Because, teachers who are sighted who teach the Braille, they only know to read it with their eyes, and so
Mm-hmm.
they're not really getting the same, what's the word, the same,
Feedback.
right, feedback that like the kids are getting. So really being more interactive with it and do more than what these certification courses are giving you. Like Araceli said with the universities and the RISA program here in Georgia, they offer just the bare minimum. And that comes with Braille and technology, both of them. And those are the two I feel like most important things for anyone learning to work with a visually impaired student that you need to learn is Braille and technology. So just be willing to, you know, go a little above and beyond what your university or your certification program teaches you because you will need it one day. It will happen. Um,
Yeah.
and if they're learning it with the student, again, take the time to learn what your student is learning. Try
Yeah.
closing your eyes and feeling it with your fingers and try to get that same feedback that they're getting.
Yeah, it's kind of like, when any other university program, right? Like if you really want to exceed in your field, you're gonna go beyond what your professor told you to do. You're gonna step out and do some volunteering, maybe based on like what it is that you're trying to do for your career. You're gonna do all these things to get you the upper hand, so you really know and are learning as much as possible, so you can be as successful as you can when you graduate.
Yeah.
Or even after, right? Because we have like we renew our certification, every, like, for me it's every 5 years. And part of it is that I have to attend these different conferences and these different things to make sure that the skills are sharp, just like any other profession. So it's kind of, being mindful of like those things that you are deciding to do to make sure that you stay on top of what's out there and what's coming out and what's new.
You both just said something so powerful, which is the feedback. And as an educator for 16 years, I think that is a really profound perspective that educators need to embrace, which is
Hmm.
the experience the child has when reading Braille. And
Yeah.
if you are a teacher and you are using eyesight to just read Braille, your experience is fundamentally different than the child sitting next to you.
Exactly.
And yeah, that's something I think that educators really need to hear, and to really think on. And so, Araceli, from your perspective, what helps teachers stay motivated and patient when a student is struggling to learn Braille?
I think that what motivates them is when they see their student, cross a milestone, whether it be, oh, they recognize letters A through J. Yay, that's a milestone. So I think like the student success really motivates teachers to kind of like keep it up and not give up and maybe get creative. If the student isn't learning one way, try a different approach.
Yeah, Braille is very hands-on, so it is not hard to get really creative with the
Mm-hmm.
them. It's actually easier than teaching a sighted student to read and write with their eyes because it's already hands-on. So just make something fun out of it, like I do with the muffin tin and the ping pong balls, just
Yeah, I do Braille salsa.
Oh, what is that? Tell us more.
So it's like, you describe different salsa and dance moves based on the shape of the Braille cell. So the Braille cell has two columns, right? And in each column, starting from the top to the bottom, is, one, two, three dots. So in
Mhm.
total there are six. So then usually when you do this, you imagine that your left foot is in dot two and your right foot is in dot five. So side by side, right? If you were looking at a braille cell, it'd be side by side. And then you just describe the moves that you do for salsa using the braille cell. So you would say, okay, so with your left foot, you're going to slide it into dot one, bring it back to dot two. The right foot's going to go back into dot six, slide it back to dot five, and repeat. And it's just a very creative way of teaching somebody because you already know where your feet should go. As long as somebody calls out the moves and the dots correctly, you should be good. It's really fun.
Oh my God, that's fabulous. I love That's a wonderful, wonderful idea. Um, And so now kind of shifting into how this is our shared responsibility as a society. And, if there's one thing for anyone who is listening, one thing you want them to take away from our conversation today, what would it be?
I would say Braille is power. It is empowering to the blindness community. It represents, just like the white cane, it represents freedom, independence, all those things that we all deserve.
For me, I actually do see on a regular basis working in the school systems how blind kids fall behind sometimes in
Hmm.
literacy and math and some classes involving maps and such. And so I would like to see those kids have the same opportunities that everyone else has so that way they can catch up and not be behind.
Yeah.
And, ultimately, in the end, it comes down to even kids who are blind have the same rights as kids who are not, and they should have the same access.
Mm.
I know, again, it's a lot more time, it's a lot more effort, it's a lot more creativity, like we had talked about through this whole thing, but it's worth it when the kids can actually be, productive members and, really make something of themselves just from having that independence.
Yeah. And not to get super dark or end on a dark note, but blindness and other physical, and other disabilities, it could happen. It could be something that could happen to anybody. We're talking about kids, you right, that usually are born with, some sort of eye condition that's congenital, but the blindness could happen at any point to anybody, which sounds scary, but it's just how it is. I work with people who, got lost their vision because they have a TBI or, were in an accident. And Braille is something that is important to them. It has helped. So, yeah,
No, absolutely. It's the truth. All
yeah.
people deserve access to opportunity, like full stop. And it's
Hmm.
our responsibility to figure out what we need to do to make sure people have that access, no matter how hard it is or how
Yeah,
creative. We can all do salsa together. Great. If that's what,
exactly.
whatever we need to do. Uh, and so,
Period.
yes, exactly. So, how can you, and this question's to you both, how can families, educators, and policymakers work together to ensure every Georgia student has equal access to literacy and opportunity?
I
Ooh,
think I've seen cases, especially with one of my own Braille students, where a parent's voice is being unheard. I really just think it starts with just listening first.
yeah, yeah.
It's that simple. Just listen first. A lot of times parents do know what is best for their child. And if a parent, like in my case, going back to the beginning of this, my parents were insistent that I learn Braille, even though the school kept saying, nah, she doesn't need Braille. And I'm thankful to this day that I have learned it, because I saw what life was like without it briefly when I was in college, and my college didn't have access to it, and I struggled a lot. Um, the independence that it gives you is great. And so I think it could easily start with parents need to be heard, school districts need to be willing to listen to the parent and come up with some reasonable accommodations. I know from experience, parents ask for some crazy, ridiculous things, but there can be a good middle meeting there. Um,
Yeah.
and like I said earlier, with people with degenerative eye conditions, who, if you know your child is going to lose what vision they have at some point, it should be required that they learn Braille. And that's where the policymakers come in. So really just having an open mind, being having an open ear, and just work together. Don't ask for something that's crazy, but work
Hmm.
together to make sure that the student has what they need, because overall it's about the student. It's not about the
Hmm.
parent, it's not about the school district. It's all about the student.
Oh, that was really good, Ashley. Amen. Yeah. Yeah, I would also say too, just like um sharing information and resources about Braille. Um, it like for example, this month, I think it was at the beginning of the month, it was Louis Braille's birthday. The
Mhm.
guy who, the Frenchman who created the Braille system, who started it off at least. And that's huge, you know. So I think that like encouraging um which they already do, but just encouraging students who are blind and the blindness community also to really go all out for these different things. Blindness awareness month and all these things is important because yes, it's listening to the parents, but it's also in educating the public, because you never know how you can impact somebody, what they can learn when they come across you um speaking about uh one of these days, like Louis Braille's birthday and what that means, or blindness to equality and achievement month. You can really educate the public, and you don't know in what way you could really bring them into the blindness community. Maybe you inspire them so that they go and actually get a degree or certification in something that's going to help regarding Braille. So I think just educating everyone is important.
Well, before we close this evening, is there anything you wish that you could say that you haven't said or that you really want to make clear? Any last thoughts?
I really would just
Mm,
like to repeat and emphasize to think about the kids,
Mm.
um, because I understand there's so much that goes into policy making and budgeting and things like that, and I do understand that. But maybe with some of the ideas and solutions that we've come up with, like having Braille tutors in the school districts who, a lot
yeah.
of them even be willing to volunteer. Um, and just really think about, if it were your kid, what would you want for them? You would want the best for them, right? And I feel like, again, having access to Braille, to that independence, and again, like Araceli said, everyone learns differently, but in a lot of cases having access to that will help with their confidence, their independence, and most importantly, their grades.
hmm Yeah, that's actually a really good idea, Ashley, about, having a bro tutor at a district, or maybe switching out, because oftentimes you have people who are interning in different ways and can also help with, providing that tutelage when they need to, as they complete their internship. So it's always a good thing. It's just a matter of like getting connected to with the blindness community and the professionals and, everybody who is working in those different districts to see, okay, what's going on here? How can we connect? How can we build something with what we already have going on?
Well, thank you both for your time this evening. It's been an absolute privilege and honor to share this space with you. Uh, I've learned a lot from you both, and I hope that our audience members as well. And, Braille is not just a reading system, it really is a bridge to independence, education, and self-worth. And I just thank you both for your time this evening, and look forward to conversations in the future.
Thank you.
Thank you.